Joining us now, Washington bureau chief for USA Today, Susan Page, and author and NBC News presidential historian, Michael Beschloss.
Michael, anything like this? Can you think of anything historically like this over the past 50 years?
Like what we're seeing tonight. And on the heels of a caucus that didn't come off as it was supposed to in Iowa within 24 hours. In terms of news, no. You know, we used to, 20 years ago, 21 years ago, you all remember that when Bill Clinton gave a State of the Union in the middle of his impeachment trial, he was not running for re-election. And the other thing was that, you know, Clinton was so disciplined, he tried to keep what he did as president apart from what was happening with impeachment, and he'd give these long speeches. They all felt that the longer the better because people would hear a proposal that would make Clinton more popular, but didn't mention impeachment. Do you think that Donald Trump is going to have the same inclination tonight?
Man, I remember those speeches. I was sitting in the chamber,
Right.
and he went on and on.
They were long.
I would wander into the cloakroom, lie down on the couch, watch it on TV. I'd wander back out. And I always thought, this is going to bomb. No, people loved it.
Yeah.
They loved it?
Absolutely.
The numbers went up?
All the time. So, Susan, somebody whose numbers didn't go up, Joe Biden's. It looked like Joe may have dodged a very bad result.
The luckiest man in America today is Joe Biden, because we know from what indications we have that he was not doing well in Iowa, and this enables him to dodge that bullet at least for a little while. If Pete Buttigieg does as well as it seems that he's done in Iowa, it prevents him from getting that banner headline going into New Hampshire today.
So, but what is the soonest that we would get results if they hand count everything? And does it matter as much? How are the results impacted by this catastrophic delay?
You know, I think they still matter. We're still going to pay attention to the results.
Okay.
But they don't have the impact they would have had if they'd come out as they usually do last night.
Beyond.
It is beyond.
Unbelievable.
So well, Michael, you're the presidential historian, so let's talk about competence. We have the president talking tonight. And we've got Mitch McConnell. Nothing's happening in the Senate. Nothing's happening from the White House other than a lot of nasty tweets, a lot of back and forth. And you just think back and you look at the field, and I ask even in the field, who has the competence? Who has the understanding of how to make Washington work again? I mean, you think about LBJ. He inherits the presidency from a martyred president who, though wildly popular, didn't know how to get things passed. LBJ breaks the logjam, passes civil rights. Same thing with TR. He had the working knowledge to use the bully pulpit to pass some remarkable, break up the trusts, give working class Americans rights. Who's out there that knows how to run Washington?
Well, you're making an argument for experience. You know, Richard Nixon's slogan in 1960 was, "It's experience that counts." I wouldn't suggest that would be a great slogan for people to use nowadays. But what you're saying is that strong presidents who had been effective have been ones with a history of knowing how to deal with Congress and also knowing how to talk to the American people. It's not something that really is very much valued in a lot of these early contests.
I mean, David, LBJ wasn't popular. I remember reading about how the Congress, who had their way with Kennedy, decided that they were going to stop him from sending grain to Russia. And he said, in his subtle Texas way, "I'm going to kill that bill." And he did it in such a way that suddenly the power
came in
went back to the
days after Kennedy's death with this life force, this passion. Famous moment where he said, "What the hell's the presidency for?
Right.
If not to make a difference?" And people picked up on that. I mean, I would say today, when we're looking at the incompetence of the Iowa vote count, worrying about the Democrats, there's one person who's going to have a pretty interesting argument today, and that's Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg, the guy who, sort of invented modern data crunching, who was a competent mayor. It'd be interesting to see how he plays this, because you'd say after this mess of Iowa, person positioned to sort of move now into the post-Iowa, post-New Hampshire, post-South Carolina world, maybe Mike.
Well, wasn't that his plan?
His plan was Sanders will be doing well. Maybe Sanders will win New Hampshire. He's leading in New Hampshire now. Biden will stumble. There'll be an opening for someone who is more centrist than Bernie Sanders going into Super Tuesday. We've never had a Super Tuesday like we're going to have on March 3rd. One that is so early and so big. A third of the delegates you need to have to be nominated elected on that single day. That is the Mike Bloomberg dream.
So, Michael, on the question of competence, the president and Republicans are already saying they're drawing a straight line from what the Iowa Democratic Party did last night to, let's say, Bernie Sanders being president. The line is they can't run a caucus in Iowa, but they want to run the entire national health care system. Does that strike you as an effective argument?
It might actually work in certain ways with certain voters, just as in 1968, for instance, when Richard Nixon was running for president, he said the Democrats could not run a convention in Chicago. Do they have the competence to lead America?
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.